This week we conclude our formal study of organizational culture, but as you can see, it is a lifetime study. But in this final devotional thought, here's what I want to share with you. When the culture of an organization truly changes for the better, when the angel of the church is redeemed, when the toxic is replaced with what is healthy, when duplicity is swept out for integrity, when this kind of deep, profound change takes place in a culture, it is the work of God. And we are privileged to cooperate with Him. Listen to the words to the servant of the Lord, originally written to Israel, and we understand it as given as a calling to Jesus Christ, and in Him we share in this calling. Here is my servant whom I uphold, the chosen one in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations. He'll not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. He will not falter or be discouraged till he establishes justice on earth. In his law the islands will put their hope. I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not give my glory to another, or my praise to idols. See, the former things have taken place, and new things I declare. Before they spring into being, I announce them to you. And here's the challenge for a leader. You have to give people the capacity to imagine the change that God is bringing. The hope that it is truly possible for God to do the impossible. Let me give you an example. Some years ago, teaching a doctoral class on leading profound change, I had a student who was from Korea. And as we talked about change and we dealt with it in churches, his mind was on something much larger. He was thinking about his own country that has been divided for half a century, and what could ever happen there, and the discouragement that he faced, and the disillusionment in thinking, could God really work here? And I thought to myself, what can I do to give him a word of hope? And the next day I brought into class this stone. It's a piece of cement, as you can see. And I told him accurately that I picked this stone up at the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. There I saw the spotters on both sides, and the barbed wire, and the no man's land, and that the divide is deep and painful. And when we look at it, how could we ever believe God could change that culture? And then I set that aside, and I said, I have one more stone I want to show you. And I picked up this one, and I said, you could see the paint on it. It's also made of cement. This is a stone from the Berlin Wall. I picked it up a few years ago when I was there, just a few months after the wall had fallen. And even this dear Oriental man who carefully guarded his emotions, had a tremendous amount of feeling in his heart, and his faith leapt. Now, how does this happen? I want to give you a word of encouragement. Some years after that, I sponsored a leadership and power symposium and had a number of people to come in to speak, and one of those was Barbara Elliott, who is just an amazing woman. Google her and you'll learn all about that. The founder and executive director of the Center for Renewal and Christ-centered ministries that effectively change lives. She wrote Candles Behind the Wall, Heroes of the Peaceful Revolution that Shattered Communism, and she shared her speech and her insights that day with us, what really brought the wall down. And let me read just a bit. Just after the Berlin Wall fell, I retraced the steps of people in Eastern Europe and Russia who resisted communism because of their faith, and interviewed 150 of them to document their role in bringing about its end. I discovered there was something unique in this experience of communism and in the way it ended. Because communist regimes were willing to use raw force on its subjects, the earlier attempts to throw off the yoke had ended in blood in East Germany in 1953, Hungary in 1957, Czechoslovakia in 1968. Soviet tanks rolled up to the border of Poland twice in 1979. But this time, something different happened. A long fuse was lit in Poland that took 10 years, but when it exploded, it set off a series of changes that eventually brought down the Berlin Wall. What took 10 years in Poland took 9 months in Hungary, 10 weeks in East Germany, 10 days in Czechoslovakia, and 10 hours in Romania. In a moral, spiritual, and political earthquake, the foundations of totalitarianism crumbled, and soon thereafter, the entire Soviet Empire imploded. Astonishingly, scarcely a shot was fired. And because this was so radically different than the course of history in resolving other conflicts of power, this case merits special consideration. I've been living in Europe for 8 years when the Berlin Wall fell and spent the next 4 unraveling the story of what happened. Most analysts focus exclusively on the power grid of economics and politics. I made that mistake initially, but once I stepped outside the conventional way of thinking, I discovered the most important factor in the collapse of communism has been largely overlooked: the moral and spiritual revolution that preceded the political one. I wrote in Candles Behind the Wall, it was not a coincidence that Solidarity workers knelt before the Black Madonna in Poland, that protesters gathered under the roofs of the churches in East Germany, or that people armed only with Bibles faced down the tanks in Moscow. I do a new thing. I declare it, says the Lord. In the hard challenge of changing culture, we have the privilege of siding with God. He is our champion, and we are his soldiers.